Hello and welcome to this very special conversation at Observer Research Foundation. I'm Naghma and with me is Ambassador Navdeep Suri. And today we're going to talk about the shifting sands in the Gulf. And can be no better person than Ambassador Suri. He's been in the region, he knows the place, and he can explain things that are happening there or the changes that we see there very, very well, probably better than anyone else. Very warm welcome to you, Ambassador Suri.
Thank you very much, Naghma. Pleasure to be back on the show with you.
My pleasure too. The warmth with Qatar was welcomed at the recently concluded Al-Ula conclave or the Al-Ula summit was indicative of the changes that are taking place in the Gulf region, the shifting sands in the Gulf region, and everything seems to be well there now. The embargoes have been lifted. The embargoes that were placed on Qatar by Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Egypt. You were there in 2017 when Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain, and Egypt had decided to break the diplomatic ties with Qatar. So now, after the Al-Ula summit and the developments thereafter, these developments will have a larger implication on the Gulf area, on the larger West Asia, and on India. But what really has brought about this change? Do you see this as a victory of American diplomacy, though Trump has been criticized on many fronts? But when you look at Gulf, did the diplomacy by Jared Kushner work here? And will this be hailed as a great achievement in America's role in the Gulf?
Yeah, I think, you've raised a number of important points, and let me take the last one first, which is the US role. I think there's no question that this would be one of the few success stories for Jared Kushner and for the Trump administration. The fact that they have weighed in decisively on Saudi Arabia, on UAE in particular, to persuade them that it is no longer in the American interest, if for want of a better term, for the rift to continue. I think they are keen that they're aware that President-elect Biden has already indicated that he would review the Trump decision to walk away from the nuclear agreement with Iran. And that whole Iran file is going to be reviewed. So the Kushner and company, and certainly the Israelis, would want a more united Gulf front against Iran rather than one which is feuding with itself. So yeah, I think the Kushner camp can certainly claim a short-term victory. The other point that you raised about the warmth of the embrace, I think we should be clear that you're likely to see a two-speed rapprochement, where the Saudis are more keen to bring things back to even keel. The Emiratis are going along for now, but the bad blood is pretty deep. These are also sometimes personal and personalized animosities. And so what I see is that, the embargo or the ban or the blockade may have been lifted and flights are resuming and so on. But are we going to soon see a UAE ambassador back in Doha? Are we going to see a Qatari ambassador in Abu Dhabi? Are we going to see high-level exchanges being resumed? I wouldn't hold my breath.
Mm-hmm. All right, so you will wait and watch. But at the same time, when the embargo was placed on Qatar, there were about 13 conditions that were laid by these countries, and Qatar did not concede to any of those. So can Qatar at this moment claim a kind of moral victory, or it can say that it just held its position? And, it did not really. How does it really also affect Qatar's relations with Iran or Turkey? How will you look at their ties? Because Qatar has not said that it is going to review its ties with Iran or Turkey. So this axis, does it remain strong as ever, or do you see that there is going to be a weakening in the so-called Qatar, Iran and Turkey tie?
So you're right that Qatar can, for the time being, claim a moral victory. That here's this little state that has shown the resilience. It's withstood to the pressure from four larger countries, and it hasn't caved in. Yes, it's come at a price, the resistance, but they've paid that price. But I think where Qatar is now heading is with the FIFA World Cup due to be held towards the end of next year in Doha. The success of that cup, to a large extent, depends on having visitors come in from Saudi Arabia and UAE and others, and having a semblance of normalcy. I think that, while those 13 conditions that the quartet had imposed or put out have been clarified now that that was a maximalist position, I wouldn't be surprised if over the next few months we actually see a moderation in Qatar's position on some of those elements. Mm-hmm. Remember, in this part of the world, saving face is very important. And nobody wants to give the impression that you've caved into a demand. So what you might see is, okay, I'm not going to stand up and say, I concede. But behind the scenes, you might well see some movement in certain areas. My own sense is that, the embrace between Doha and Tehran may loosen up a little bit. But remember that Qatar and Iran share the world's largest gas field. And so they have to be partners for their own sake in that gas field. So an expectation that Qatar would walk away from Iran is unrealistic. But at the same time, I think it's fair to say that the pressure put by the quartet actually drove Qatar closer into the embrace of Turkey and Iran. And now that pressure is off, that embrace may loosen. But as I said, nothing happens instantly. It'll take a little bit of time for those elements to take place. And the Saudis, the way they handle this is going to be quite crucial, because really it is the Saudis who see themselves in opposition to Turkey and Iran at this point of time for who claims the leadership of the Muslim world.
Absolutely.
And so the Saudis are certainly driven in part by that desire to not cede that space to Turkey and Iran.
Yes, absolutely. Very rightly, as you pointed out, I just wanted to ask you, does this strengthen Saudi Arabia's position now, this cooperation and this coming together of the Gulf countries, or the unity that was visible at the summit? Does it strengthen Saudi Arabia's position as the leader of the Islamic world? And at the same time, when you said earlier that at this moment, Saudi Arabia is the country that seems very keen in normalizing everything and bringing everyone together. And we know that the Prince Mohammed bin Salman has been very active. So how does this help him, this unity, this coming together? And why is Saudi Arabia so keen right now?
The way I see it is that Mohammed bin Salman is trying to evolve as a leader. He wants to focus on his very ambitious domestic agenda of economic and social reform. And that reform is real. The changes that are taking place in Saudi Arabia are real. And, even those who don't like MBS, or those who want to focus on the terrible Khashoggi affair and so on, would have to concede that these changes were overdue, and it takes a lot of courage to carry out the reforms that he is working on in Saudi Arabia, to make Saudi Arabia a more normal country and not a medieval Wahhabist monarchy. So I think all of us should applaud those changes that are being ushered in. What the Qatar agreement does, I think, is it removes one unnecessary distraction from the agenda that he wants to pursue. as is Yemen. These were two major local distractions for Saudi Arabia. That even while you're trying to push a reform agenda, you are embroiled in a conflict in Yemen, and you are embroiled in this unproductive sort of spat with Qatar as a neighbor. And I think if these two are taken off the table, that really does free up space for MBS to pursue the domestic agenda that he has, along with diluting the Qatar, Iran, Turkey axis, which allows him again to claim that position of leadership of the Muslim world.
And a lot of things have changed and have improved in the Gulf region, Ambassador Suri, and this will probably help the Biden administration in shaping its foreign policy towards Iran, because we can, when we look back, we see the Abraham Accord that has taken place, which has led to the normalization of ties between Israel, UAE, Bahrain, all these countries. And now this, so clearly Biden administration will not have much to worry in this region, at least.
I think, the Biden administration has welcomed the Abraham Accords. And, to the extent that they create a more normal relationship between Israel and some of the Arab countries, I think it helps in reducing tensions. It doesn't address the legitimate issues of the Palestinians, unfortunately. But I guess they will end up following a somewhat different track for now, while this rapprochement happens. My friends in Abu Dhabi tell me that they are actually stunned by the pace at which relations have normalized between Israel and UAE. There are delegations every other day. There are flights directly between Abu Dhabi and Tel Aviv. And they've actually done a visa-free travel agreement, which is unprecedented for Israel to do, or for the Emiratis to do so quickly. So you can see that, again, when you talk about shifting sands, they're not just in that part of the Gulf, but the impact is beyond in terms of the relationship with Israel. I think for the Biden administration, one thing that they'll have to be careful is not to make the mistake that the Obama administration did, which caused the strong opposition from UAE and Saudi Arabia to the Iran agreement. You see, from the Obama administration's perspective, and from that 5+1 process that signed the nuclear agreement, the focus was only on Iran's nuclear program. But the countries in the region, the Saudis and the Emiratis in particular, say, hang on. Our real problem, apart from Iran's nuclear program, is their interference in our internal affairs. The fact that they see a Shia crescent emerging that goes from Bahrain into Saudi Arabia and into Iraq and into Syria and into Lebanon, and so there is this perception in the Gulf that an expansive Iran is interfering in Arab Iraq, in Arab Syria, in Arab Lebanon, and Bahrain, sometimes using a Shia minority in these countries as a bridgehead, sometimes using its leverage otherwise. So they are very keen that if there's any resumption of relations, of discussions with Iran, they should address not just the nuclear issue. They should also address what they see as the malevolent Iranian influence in the region, and for Iran to have more normal ties with its neighbors. So I think that's going to be a crucial factor for the Biden administration to look at.
Absolutely. And it's clearly good news for India, any kind of improvement in intra-GCC ties, because it is going to affect India investment, trade. We know that we've been very keen in improving our diplomatic ties with Gulf countries. There has been a renewed vigor there. We've had visits by External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar, and of course the prime ministerial visits that have taken place earlier. So how did that embargo affect India earlier, and how are things going to change now with improvement in ties within the GCC countries?
Well, I remember from my days in Abu Dhabi, a couple of days after we were called to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to be told about the embargo and the reasons for imposing it. I got a very worried call from Delhi saying, hey, Did you realize that the embargo means that our flights to Qatar will now have to take a much longer route, and particularly for flights coming in from Kerala? It meant that they could carry less baggage and fewer passengers because they simply didn't have the range, the smaller aircraft to do the long detour. And so it was a real nuisance. So I remember going up to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, meeting the Minister of State, and saying, look, we have the largest expat community, we have the largest number of flights, and we are badly affected. I must say that the very reassuring response was that, look, this is a feud between us and Qatar. We don't intend to cause any damage to any of our friends inadvertently, as it seems to have happened in this case. And so within a day, they clarified that the overflight restrictions would only apply to Qatari aircraft and not to third country aircraft like those from India. So that is one clear area where we were initially impacted, but rapidly eased. The one which did not ease up is the fact that many Indian companies have major investments in UAE. And when they made those investments, like when Ashok Leyland established a bus assembly plant or Dabur established a major manufacturing facility, they weren't looking just at the UAE market. They were positioning in UAE so that they could market their products to the entire Gulf countries. But when the embargo started, it meant that the Qatari market, which is a significant market for them, particularly with all the projects coming up for the FIFA World Cup, etc., they found that suddenly that market was shut out for them. And others who were, exporting to Jebel Ali port and then sending out shipments to Doha or elsewhere found that they weren't able to do that. So the businesses really had to scramble and come up with alternates. They did some of that, but I think Indian business will be heaving a sigh of relief that this is over. For Indian diplomacy, I think it's also a sigh of relief because we no longer have to do a fine balancing act where we were mindful that, our relations with UAE and with Saudi Arabia had really changed dramatically over the last 3 or 4 years. But we were cognizant that it shouldn't be at the expense of a relationship that we've traditionally had with Qatar. And so, reading the tea leaves, I think was good that Minister Jaishankar was able to make an early visit to Qatar even before the rapprochement was announced. And what we hope certainly is that we will be able to attract investments into India, both from the quartet or from UAE, Saudi Arabia, but also from Qatar. And it doesn't have to be an either or for us. We will also be in a position to bid for major projects linked to FIFA, etc., in Qatar.
Absolutely. India has actually made an effort and tried that it should not be an either or. We've maintained a relationship with Qatar as well as Saudi Arabia, UAE. Thank you so much for that conversation. Pleasure to have you on this show. Thank you so much, Ambassador Suri.
Thank you.